Today's episode is presented by LodeStar, the fee experts.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of LodeStar's Lending Leaders. Today, I'm joined by Molly Elmore, a partner at Valhil Advisors, and we're going to dive a little bit into blockchain and the value that we can get out of it. So thank you, Molly, so much for talking with me today.
You're very welcome, Alayna. It's nice to meet you.
Well, before we jump into blockchain, you have been around for a minute in the industry. You've advised clients in changes through technology and media. What are some of the biggest changes you've experienced and how they've affected both your career and the industry at large?
So I see blockchain as the next version of the internet. And my earlier career was really focused on media, technology, internet space. And we sort of saw, 20, 25 years ago, how the way people exchange information changed. We saw basic websites, and that kind of evolved into sort of connection-based websites, social media, where people interacted with each other. And we saw the beginning of the creator kind of economy with YouTube and blog posts and people having a voice. But it was still very centralized in companies that kind of managed it, the Facebooks, the YouTubes, et cetera, of the world. And there was one big problem with the internet to date, which was there was no way to send money to people through the internet. Like, I could send you an invoice. Mm-hmm. I could tell you that I wanted to pay you. I could send you a credit card thing and you would sort of pay me through a credit card. But there was no way to actually send money immediately and that is what the blockchain is bringing in and solves this big missing piece for a truly kind of internet-based economy. And that not only can we exchange information, not only can I create content or whatever that you might want to pay me for, but now we have mechanisms that are coming online to actually allow money to be exchanged instantly between people, between businesses, between schools, government, et cetera. And I think it's going to dramatically change how we look at business in the same way that it's hard to imagine business without the internet. This is going to be, I think, equally transformative once it comes online.
Yeah, I think there's so many things that with technology, we're kind of just starting to see the first iteration of it, be it AI, be it blockchain. We're really starting to see how it might affect our world in the future. And I think that's only going to grow as we continue along this path. I think you touched on this a little bit, but how is blockchain, unique from some other things? I think a lot of times I first started hearing about blockchain probably 6 or 7 years ago, kind of murmurs of this new wave, but I think we're starting to actually get into the meat of it now. What is, the term blockchain revolution mean to you?
To me, it means it's going to dramatically evolve how businesses and people interact with each other via what we call the internet. And that the blockchain is essentially an accounting ledger, just like a database for money transactions that lives virtually in the cloud in a decentralized manner. And so when I send you money, you have to trust that I'm good for it, right? And so there's this sort of relationship between us. And that's generally why we use third-party entities like a PayPal, for example, because we trust that PayPal is going to, be there to make sure that this transaction is successful. And when we move to the blockchain, all of these different transactions are now going to be publicly available for the most part with public blockchains, meaning this accounting ledger is available for anybody to see, and it will put this transparency around how businesses work. The other major change is that right now, because we have these central entities like banks or credit card processors that facilitate our transactions, MasterCard doesn't really want me paying you $1 via a transaction, right? They take their percentage plus their flat fee. So it doesn't really make sense to do these very small transactions. So lots of businesses have set up, for example, to bill you monthly, like your credit card or your phone bill or whatever. It just is easier for them to bill once, you pay once. But there's this thing called counterparty trust in that, meaning if you and I have a relationship, and let's say I'm a consultant and I'm doing something for you, I can either bill you in advance, which means you trust that I'm actually going to do it, or I do the work and then I bill you at the end of the month, which means I got to trust that I'm going to do it. And then you're going to actually be good for it and pay me at the end. So in that model, somebody's got to sort of pony up the trust that the other side of the deal is going to do their thing. And that's because it's really impractical in our current system for me to bill you like every day, or for me to bill you every hour. And so blockchain payments are so inexpensive to run that we could have a relationship. I could be the phone company and you have an account with me, and I bill you every hour. And so you you pay me on a streaming basis. Or let's say I'm a business and you don't know how much time you need to hire me for. We kind of live in this world. We have to have an estimate. We have to sort of figure it out in advance. Well, what if now we have a mechanism where I just bill you for each minute that we're doing the thing. And then when we're done, I stop billing you. So like an Uber ride, or even a hotel room, or some other thing that you would rent, like a paddle boat or something, you could just pay for the amount of time that you're using it and get billed every minute. So there's so many things I think that will change that it's almost hard to imagine. In the same way that if 20 years ago when the internet first started, I tried to explain Uber to you and you're like, yeah, you're going to have this phone that has a screen and you're going to order a car, and then you're going to be able to track where it is on this little map, and you're never going to have any money or even a credit card. It just bills through it automatically. And then they're going to send you a little message and you can rate the driver. People would have thought you were insane, like talking about some futuristic crazy thing. So in that way, some of the blockchain kind of evolutionary ideas, I think, are even hard for us to imagine now because it's still so early. That the Uber equivalent for how payments are going to change business, I think our imaginations are still stuck in like the world that we see now. That the future, I think, is going to be remarkable in terms of how blockchain will change money.
Yeah, I mean, you look at 15, 20 years ago, and if you told someone that I would be reading my questions off of a smartphone, right? That would be absolutely insane. That's connected to the internet, that has all of these crazy things. Half of our podcast is produced from my phone, right? Sometimes, like if I'm on the road and all of that, a lot of our content is driven by that. And being able to take something like this and do it, so to be quite frank, low budget, and being able to do it is not something that you would have been able to do 15, 20 years ago, because you would have had to hire producers and all that. Not that podcasts existed 20 years ago, because there was no way to consume them.
Correct. And a big limiting factor was bandwidth for internet speed. Like you could have wanted to do a video show 15 years ago, but nobody could watch it because the internet wasn't there yet. And so I think innovation was sort of stifled because of the tech. So as we see the blockchain payments tech become in place and prevalently used, there's going to be a similar acceleration for all the cool opportunities for all of us.
And so you also have a podcast called Escape Velocity. So congrats. I've been told it just started, which is always so fun. We're on season 3 now, so it's going to transform before your eyes. It's beautiful. So you talk on that podcast a lot about geopolitics and monetary policy, which has so much to do with blockchain, right? There's a lot of concerns right now around crypto with the SVB collapse and the other collapses that happened. What is your take on kind of that situation of how that can you see that stalling some of the work we're doing with blockchain just out of fear, right?
I actually think it's accelerating the adoption of blockchain. So blockchain is all about payments. It's all about money. And right now we have a very antiquated money system with banks. Banks actually can't send money to other banks either. It's very old fashioned. Like the system that was developed for banking like a couple hundred years ago is still in place. So like if I'm a bank in New York and I want to send money to somebody, and like you're a depositor in my bank and you want to send money to somebody in like Greece, I can't electronically send the money. I have to have a bank in Greece where I've already pre-deposited a bunch of money. And then like this accounting ledger system, I'm just going to deduct some money from your account in your New York bank, and we're going to go and credit it, move it around in that bank in Greece. So there is no ability to electronically send the rights to money, because that's actually what this is about. It's not really that I'm sending you the money. I'm sending you the property rights associated with owning the money, which means I can give it to somebody else or spend it or whatever. Now, we kind of have to see the current banking system fall before we can truly experience a new banking system where money is very likely going to change. And, we've seen over the last couple of decades a big problem with inflation, and that the value of something like the dollar is falling. A lot of fiat currencies are experiencing that. And the reason why Jimmy and I cover geopolitics on our podcast is that even as Americans who focus on American businesses primarily, we live in a global world, and we're seeing some major changes from groups like the BRICS nations who are now interacting with each other outside the dollar system. And that's going to affect all of us. Like, if the dollar is no longer the global reserve currency, what does that mean for us? What does that mean for businesses in the United States? Like, is there opportunities for us, or is there going to be negatives for us? And so covering geopolitics helps us understand how the future of money is going to change. And I think situations like SVB and Silvergate and even Credit Suisse in Europe and Deutsche Bank, like, we're seeing a lot of changes to the banking system, which to us looks like a little bit controlled demolition so that we can restart with a new blockchain-based money system using what we call asset-backed currencies. Central banks have been stockpiling gold for a long time. They're not very secretive about it. I mean, there's press releases within the gold industry pretty regularly. Why would they want all that gold? What is that for? Well, when we move to blockchain-based money, very likely we're going to see some new currencies issued that gold is one of the assets to back those currencies.
Yeah. One of the things that you guys have on your website is data is the oil of the 21st century. We're big on data here at LodeStar. And I personally think data is one of the most valuable resources you can have. But what does that mean to you? And how do you respect that and use that really as a slogan, right? Because that's a pretty powerful slogan.
It is powerful because in an information age that we live in, where we do lots of things online, we buy lots of things online, we interact with each other, all of that exchange is stored in databases. And the data as the new oil is not a new concept, but it's becoming increasingly big deal as more and more of everything is online. Now the money's going to be more online. Now all of our interaction, during 2020, we found that a lot of people now did business through Zoom calls just like this, where, a decade ago, that would have been a very strange idea to say we don't really need sales calls anymore. Sales guys don't have to travel. They're just going to do these things on Zoom, which means now there's all this information available. Now, I come from the world of marketing, and when very skilled direct marketers, especially, they take advantage of all of that data and they build predictive models. They build forecasting tools to help anticipate, who's going to buy what and when. And that's just one example. I mean, Facebook has the most sophisticated ad platform I've ever seen in my life because they know so much about you. And that's why they're able to charge the rates that they do, because that information is as valuable. I mean, oil is energy. Energy is money. Like, the world runs on energy, and information is a form of that, in my opinion.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think there's a lot of interesting things happening in the data space. If you look at what's happening with TikTok right now, this will come out in a few weeks, but we just had the hearings and all of that. And there's a lot of kind of data oriented concerns, I think, in this space. And
privacy
Meta has done a lot.
Privacy has become a different kind of concern, because you may sign an agreement when you sign up for a social media platform without really understanding the depths of that agreement. Like, yes, not many of us read the full terms and certain conditions when we sign up for a social media platform, and not understanding that all of the interaction and all the photos we put on Facebook, for example, are property of Meta. And so how does the business community do their thing and be profitable, but at the same time respect the privacy of their consumers? I mean, that is a balancing act, which we just hope in the end of the day, the leaders of our business community have integrity. But I know that it's probably going to be continually a challenge for us as we move further into this sort of digital world, to be cautious about what you do share online, because once you've kind of put it into you kind of learn this too, if you ever texted something you didn't need to text, or tweeted something you maybe shouldn't have tweeted.
Mm-hmm.
Once it's out there, like it's out there, you're going to have to make sure
time machines exist for better or for worse. And I think, once you've done marketing and you've kind of seen the back end of the beast, as it were, you kind of realize how limited your privacy actually is online. And I know for a lot of people, especially as, we talk about millennials aging and Gen X aging, a lot of these people signed agreements when they were teenagers, right?
Right.
A teenager is not even going to consider their online privacy, right? Versus, now it could be a 30-something looking at, I personally look at my Facebook history and I'm like, oh God, why did I post that? And I was like, oh, I was 17 at the time. That's why. And I think that's also important to recognize as well. Moving on, a term that unnerves some people is tokenization. I think the NFTs kind of had their big moment,
right?
And now everyone's kind of like, what happened to that? What does it mean for you? And what is your vision of that within the mortgage space as well as the banking industry?
I think we are moving to a world where everything is tokenized, everything of value is tokenized, and that can be a great subject to debate and dig into, because like, what exactly is everything? I do think that in terms of real estate, we will absolutely see real estate be tokenized, which means that the deed associated with property, for example, would be an NFT on the blockchain. And what that means then is that if I want to sell it, what I'm really selling are the property rights associated with owning a building. So, because the building itself isn't going to be on the blockchain, right? But the rights associated with it will be. So I could sell the house, I could burn the house down, I could rent the house, I could, whatever I would normally have the privileges and rights to do, I would be able to do that. We also, I think, will see loans be tokenized. And there's some really cool technology with the blockchain called smart contracts, where I can, like, let's say the current system of escrow before you kind of buy a house, that would all be managed by a smart contract. And then let's say every month I have to make a payment on this loan. We could do that idea we talked about before. Well, I'll pay you a little bit every day. So we don't have to have somebody pay in advance or somebody wait to get paid afterwards. It will change how loans are paid off, because small payments are no longer going to be cost prohibitive.
And now, do you expect that to have benefits for the consumer? I know a lot of times people talk about in debt payoff plans to make smaller payments to your mortgage because you end up paying less interest over time. Do you see that daily payments being something that could incentivize consumers to switch over just because of overall cost savings?
I think there'll be tremendous cost savings. Now, this might scare some people in the mortgage industry, because when you have massive efficiency come in from technology, you don't always need all the people who are doing some of the work. I think we're going to absolutely see this in the stock markets as well in terms of settlement. But let's say you own a loan business and you have a big staff, some of whom are doing follow-up on who paid their bill, who hasn't paid their bill. If that's all managed via smart contracts, the overhead for that business could be dramatically lower, which means that cost savings could be passed on to the borrower.
Yeah.
I think the same way that, email is so much cheaper than direct mail, like using the blockchain for payments is much more efficient.
Yeah. I think there's always going to be that fear, I think, especially in the mortgage space of, if we automate, we're losing jobs, right? It's something that I talk to a lot about with other vendors in this space. Because a lot of times we are automating things that a human is doing. But one of my favorite things that I've heard, and I will probably be repeating it for the rest of my life, is automate to elevate. I think it's so important for us to really look at positions and say, is this something that a human really should be doing, right? When we talk about some of these things, why are they staring and comparing, right? That's one of the most common things. That's what we replace. As if we can use tools to get people more in higher level positions, making higher level directions, right? Someone's still going to have to build the AI. Someone has to build the blockchain, right? There's people there and maintain it, to be honest. That's a huge part of that piece. But for us, it's more about, preventing that hire and fire cycle that we see over and over again. We're kind of in that downturn right now a little bit, is how can we prevent the next round of layoffs, right? And I think that's so important, because it's extremely discouraging to people to be like, I have this great job, and the market turns around in 2 years, you don't have that great job again. And to do it over and over again is exhausting.
We've seen automation affect a lot of jobs over decades. So this is not a new phenomenon. My sort of advice to someone who is nervous about that is, it's very difficult for automation to replace creativity and genuine problem solving and genuine insights. Like, AI is getting pretty cool.
Yes.
If you had told me that there would be less need for copywriters very soon because AI would take that over, I would have thought you were being a bit premature. But we've seen this year that the developments in AI are pretty remarkable. But there are still going to be some points where AI is only searching data that's already been published, right? So if you are a forward thinker and looking ahead and trying to creatively do something that has never been done before, like an innovator, AI can't really compete with AI or robots that are programmed. So those of us who truly try to be visionary and forward thinking and look ahead to creatively anticipate, I don't know how automation is going to replace those skills. Maybe I'll be wrong, but for now, I think we're good.
And I think to that copywriting piece, I was talking internally about it with my team, right? We create a lot of copy. But at the end of the day, right, we're never going to have anything go out without a human check if we look at automating things internally. And to be quite honest, we're experts at things, right? So I was talking with my data team. He had Chat GPT put something together for him to see if it was correct on closing costs. And he's like, if you look at it, it's right, kind of. He's like, but they're really confident that they're right, which is kind of problematic. So there is that need for human interaction.
And one of the most ingenious parts of marketing that is actually very, very hard is to use humor in marketing well. To have subtle jokes. And even in an industry like lending and mortgage that probably isn't full of the jokes all the time, a clever, well-placed joke can really do an amazing job to get attention. Yeah. And I don't know how AI is going to be funny. Maybe they will be, but to be clever and witty, I think is going to be the secret for copywriters to have longevity, even in corporate fields that are generally more informational based. A well-placed joke is always well received, especially if it's tasteful.
Yeah. I mean, we're a closing cost company that produces a comic strip every week. So I totally get what you're saying.
Cool.
Well, here at LodeStar, as we wrap up today, we're big about celebrating things that inspire us. And a LodeStar is a guiding light in the night sky. So what do you consider an inspiration in your life? And you can do it work or you can do personal. I always like to make that disclaimer.
What do I consider an inspiration? So I'm an entrepreneur at heart. And so I love seeing like underdog startups kind of compete with incumbents. That to me is sort of like the David and Goliath type thing. And I think what we're seeing with some blockchain stuff are some very incredible teams who are not very well funded, but have a lot of heart standing up to some of these more established players. We're going to see this in the world of media. We're going to see this in the world of money and banking. And I find it so inspiring when the underdog comes along and actually replaces the incumbent and sort of just shows that, you know what, just because you're top of the hill now, that doesn't mean you get to stay there forever. And then don't get too lazy. And to see kind of things be shaken up by new passionate teams is always very inspiring to me.
Yeah, I think that's great. Well, thank you so much, Molly, for taking the time to talk with me today. Where can people find you?
So we are pretty active on Twitter. So we have Valhil Advisors. It's just at Valhil Advisors. And our Escape Velocity podcast is on YouTube at Escape Velocity-Valhil.
Awesome. I mean, I also would like to escape Pilates, though. Well, thank you so much, Molly, for joining me today.
Sure.
And I hope everyone enjoyed our podcast today. We'll see you next week. Please like, subscribe, all of the things. It greatly helps us out here at LodeStar to be the David beating our Goliaths in our industry and continue to grow as a small business. So thank you so much, Molly. And we'll see everyone next week.
All right. Take care.
Thank you for listening to the LodeStar's Lending Leaders Podcast. Please like, subscribe, and rate us 5 stars anywhere you get your podcasts. A special thank you to the LodeStar podcast production team, Jim Paolino, Tim Austin, and John Gardner.